I want to share something with you, something that haunted my childhood, and in some ways, still haunts me today. This story stretches across years, not a single night, not a single scare, but years of my life. Years of a nightmare that never really felt like just a dream. It started when I was a kid. I can't tell you the exact year or the exact age I was, but I know I was still young enough to be terrified of the dark, yet just old enough to realize that not everything could be explained away by shadows and imagination. That's when I began having a recurring nightmare. At first, it came only every couple of months, nothing frequent enough to make me think I was cursed, but often enough to burn itself into my memory. Even now, decades later, I can recall it with painful clarity. The dream always began the same way. I would wake up, or at least, I thought I did. I was lying in bed, but I wasn't seeing through my own eyes. Instead, it was like I was watching myself from the ceiling, like a ghost hovering above my bed, looking down. I could see everything: my body under the covers, my bedroom furniture, the faint red glow of my digital clock. The angle was all wrong, like I had turned into a security camera bolted to the corner of the ceiling. That dissociation alone was enough to terrify me. Even as a child, I knew something was wrong. I would try to move, to swim through the air and lower myself back into my body, but I couldn't. I could only turn my head to look around, trapped in this awful floating perspective. I was half-lucid aware that I was dreaming, but that awareness didn't help. If anything, it made the fear sharper, and every time, the same details would follow. The first thing I'd notice was the clock. Always the clock. Its red numbers would tick backward, counting in reverse, hours rolling into minutes, minutes rolling into seconds, as though time itself was unraveling. That was always the first sign that the nightmare had begun. Then came the drawings. Crayon drawings taped to random spots on my walls, my dresser, even the closet door. They were childlike, the kind of thing a kid my age might make. But I knew, deep in my bones, I had never drawn them. I wasn't even the type of kid who liked drawing. Each one showed the same thing: a row of people, holding hands, smiling, and among them, a smaller figure, a child, me. They always stood in front of a house with a bright blue roof. I can't recall the finer details, the windows, the doors, but the roof was always the same striking blue. And no matter how many times I dreamed it, I never remembered creating those drawings. Then there was the toy, an old toy train, one I had lost years before the dreams ever started. Yet in the nightmare, it was always there, always in a different spot on my bedroom floor, as if someone had been playing with it. At first, the strangeness of these details would be enough to send my heart racing, but that wasn't the climax of the nightmare. No, the worst part always came the same way. It began as a feeling, a pull, an overwhelming urge to turn my gaze toward the window. And when I did, he would be there, a man standing just inches from the glass. His face pressed close, eyes unblinking, watching me sleep. His hair was gray, short, neatly kept, his face pale, expression unreadable. But what I always noticed, what my mind always locked onto, was the scar, a jagged cut on his left temple. He would just stand there for a moment, watching. Then he would lift his hands and claw at the glass, scraping as if trying to slide it open from the outside. That's when the terror always peaked. That's when I would wake up. Sometimes I jolted awake so violently that I sat up gasping for air. Other times, I froze under the covers, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. But no matter what, I always ended up checking the window, looking for claw marks, looking for smudges, looking for something. But there was never anything there. After the fourth nightmare, I told my parents. My mom said recurring dreams weren't unusual, especially for kids. My dad tried to comfort me, saying they were always just one room away if I ever got scared. But he could see the fear still gripping me, so he took my hand and led me outside, circling the house with me to prove that no one had been near my window. No footprints in the dirt. No smudges on the glass. Nothing. It should have calmed me, but it didn't. Because even then, at such a young age, I knew having the same nightmare 4 times in a row meant something. Dreams weren't supposed to repeat like that. And then, just as suddenly as they started, they stopped. For almost 6 months, I didn't have a single one. The fear faded. I convinced myself I was fine. Childhood fears always find a way of dissolving into the background when life goes back to normal. But just when I let my guard down, it came back. This time, everything was the same. The drawings, the clock, the toy train, the floating perspective. But there was one difference. My bedroom window was open. Wide open. I woke instantly, heart hammering, and that's when the true horror hit me. I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis. My body locked in place, heavy as stone, while my mind screamed at me to get up, to run, to check the window. But I couldn't. I lay there for 5 eternal minutes, cold air seeping across my skin, every nerve screaming that he was out there, that he was climbing in. I was utterly helpless. When control finally snapped back, I forced myself to the window. My hands shook as I grabbed the latch. Locked. Secure. But that didn't erase the terror of those minutes. It was unlike any fear I had ever known. Months went by again. I didn't trust the quiet anymore. Every night before bed, I replayed the dream in my mind, bracing myself, telling myself that if it happened again, I'd be ready. And, strangely enough, it worked. The next time I had the dream, I wasn't as scared. I didn't even bother checking the window afterward. Another time came. I was even calmer. It was as though I had dulled the nightmare by sheer force of will. But something about it lingered. Enough that I decided to tell my parents again. This time, they listened more carefully. I described every detail, from the floating perspective to the drawings, the train, and finally, the man. And when I mentioned the cut on his forehead, everything changed. My dad froze. My mom's face drained of color. My dad interrupted me, asking if I was sure about the cut. I told him I was. He looked at my mom. A silent exchange passed between them, one I wasn't meant to see. They told me everything was fine, that I didn't need to worry. But I wasn't satisfied. And a few days later, they sat me down. They told me about Uncle Brian. Brian wasn't really my uncle. He was my dad's friend from college, a man who had been around a lot when I was little, too little to remember. He used to babysit me, read me stories, even tuck me into bed. But then, something happened. My parents never told me the details, just that my dad had a falling out with Brian so severe that he banned him from ever coming near me again. The only detail they did share made my blood run cold. Brian had a scar on his forehead, a scar from a car accident, long before I was born. They didn't connect the dots for me. They didn't have to. Later that night, when my mom went to bed, my dad lingered with me, and he told me his theory. He thought my dreams were buried memories, that I had once been close to Brian, so close that I would cry whenever he left, that somehow my brain had retained the image of his scar and was using the dreams to process something I couldn't consciously remember. But I had no memories of Brian, not one. And the more I thought about it, the less I believed it was all just some trick of memory. A year passed. The dreams came less frequently, once or twice, enough to remind me I wasn't free. Then came year 4. One night, I woke from the dream, heart pounding as always. I turned to glance at the window, out of habit. And this time, I saw something move. Not in the dream, in real life. A flicker of movement, right outside my window. All the fear I had suppressed for years came flooding back in one tidal wave. I screamed for my parents. My dad sprinted outside barefoot while my mom clutched me tight. Minutes later, he came back inside, whispering to my mom. I never heard sirens, never heard police. But the next morning, my dad confessed. He had seen faint footprints under my window. I asked if he thought it was Brian. He said that was impossible, that Brian didn't know where we lived. But the look in his eyes told me he wasn't as certain as he wanted me to believe. That was the last time I ever had the dream. But here's the thing. I don't think my parents ever called the police that night. I don't think they ever told me the full truth about Brian. And I will never know whether the man I saw was a phantom of my childhood memory or if someone, flesh and blood, had been watching me sleep for years. The thought that terrifies me most isn't even the possibility that it was Brian. It's the possibility that it wasn't. That it was someone else entirely. Some stranger who knew where I lived, who knew which window was mine, who knew how to slip into my dreams, and who, for reasons I'll never understand, stopped after 4 years. Stopped, or simply found someone else to watch. Long pause, whispering. Every night, even now, I check my window before I sleep, because I know one day I might see him again. If you felt the chill from this story, imagine what else is lurking in the shadows, waiting to be told. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell.